Hello and welcome to the 21st episode of Tailoring in Conversation. In this series, I'll be talking to tailors, business owners, cloth merchants, and other industry participants to gain a better insight into their worlds. If you have enjoyed our content so far, please don't forget to subscribe so that you can support us and we can put out more tailoring content for the worldwide tailoring community. My guest for today is Joshua Dobrik. Joshua is the first friend I ever made in London, and we did Newham College together. He continued to do an apprenticeship at Edward Sexton's and then moved on to Huntsman's and then eventually set up a company with his business partner, Kimberly Lawton, called Dobrik and Lawton. Josh is doing other things now, and he's teaching, and I'd like to know more about what he's doing, so let's start the conversation and see where it gets us. Thank you, man. Thank you for being with me today. And I should start with saying welcome. And how are you?
It's so formal. It's like a newscast team, you know? It's weird.
No,
Speaking to you in this
it will get
context.
out of hand.
Usually I'm used to us like fucking about, but here we are like face to face on a laptop. I'd like to preempt that I was refused entry into his flat to do this interview on the basis that it didn't look proper.
Okay. Well, that's a good start, man.
It is.
Right, Josh. I know you're the first person I befriended when I moved to London, but I've never specifically asked you the question I asked everyone.
I was the only friend
Who
you
were
had for a while, actually, as well,
well?
which is quite
Yeah,
a sad
that is
fact.
true. Yes. Well, what would I do without you?
Exactly.
But I never asked you the specific question of who were you at 10 years old?
Oh gosh, here we go. Deep.
Yeah.
Um, I don't. How do you answer that kind of question? I don't know.
Well, what type
Um,
of kid were you? What if I would see you, if we would go to school together or we would be playing around in the same street, which of the kids were you?
uh, Mischievous. I was always good at school, um,
Yeah.
and camp as hell is how I was generally.
Okay.
I think that sums it up.
Right. And did you always know that you have interest in tailoring and garment construction and fashion and things like that, or
I,
that?
I yeah, my grandmother was a seamstress, so started learning from her. I was like 12.
And you
So
learned
yeah,
because
ran in the
she
family.
called you in, or you approached her?
Oh no, I approached her. Stereotypical gay kid who wants to make frocks. Yeah, that was moi.
Yeah. Okay, and I know you grew up in France partially.
Yeah.
Were you born in France as well?
Born here, raised
You're
here
born here.
until I was about 11, then moved to France. But always went to a French school here because my mum was brought up in Belgium. So there was a sort of a Francophile kind of tie to the family always. Yeah,
Right.
but no affiliations to France as such, only when we moved.
And how old were you when you permanently came back to the UK?
I was 22, which is when I met you.
Oh, right. So when I met you, you just came back.
Yeah.
That's insane, man.
Yeah,
I
we were both
remember when.
fresh. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I went to Newham, there was this very well dressed young man sitting there, and you looked very bored, and as the teachers were like talking, like because you already had some experience, right? You were making buttonholes. Everyone was like, "Whoa, what the hell is going on here?" You had done some alterations. I think you were working at Hackett at the time, right?
Yeah, I was on the shop floor trying to make a buck
Right.
because I was
And you were
broke
sitting there
as
and you were just meditating. And when I looked at you, I thought, well, this guy is really bored. And then you looked at me and you were like, exciting. We're going to start this course. And I was like, yeah. Right.
I
Um,
remember I remember distinctly your first spiel when everyone was going around and saying where they'd come from, and yours really hit home, like the story of migration, um, and oppression back home, and have you relayed that journey on media or not, on social media or not?
No, I will
I
at
think
some
I think
point.
it's something. Is now an opportunity, or was there another time for that? Because I think it's a particularly important moment to do that kind of thing, and I think your story tells a lot, and could definitely impact people who find themselves in the same situation as you.
Well, I definitely will do an episode on that. Maybe I
You're
should do some.
curtailing tell the world.
Yeah, I want to use the time to tell your story, not
Right.
mine.
Okay.
So,
Fine. Fine.
so
Fine.
I'll
Okay.
do that at a later time. But
Okay.
okay, here's the thing. So, let's start from the moment that we kind of like met and we started Newham College. We were both kind of like really driven. As Valentine told both of us, we were almost taking the piss because we were like working way ahead. We were like pushing him, like teach us
We
how to
were.
do
Yeah.
this. How did
I think
your
it's
journey from?
we were both in shit. Like there was no money. We were both like, how are we going to survive? And I think that's what like pushed us because we had no alternative but to make it happen, right?
Well,
We
I
didn't
have
have the
to say
luxury of
that what pushed me were you because I was planning to go. I thought, I'm going to do Newham. I'm going to do level one,
I
two, and
remember
three, and
this.
one. Once I've learned everything, then I'm going to go on Savile Row. And then, literally 1 week after we started Newham, you were like, "Dude, you should really go there. You should just go to Savile Row and say hello to everyone. Just pop in and whatever, whatever." And then, so that really encouraged me. So, thank you for that. And I remember you were calling sextons and you were trying to get an apprenticeship there.
I was pushing my way in like there was no
Yeah,
tomorrow. I
yeah,
was like sweeping floors and making coffee to like get a foot in the door.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Can you give a brief summary? I mean, because I don't want to have like a very long conversation about the standard things that everyone does, like sweeping floors and we've all done it, right? But can you give a brief summary about how your journey started from Newham up until literally like this year? What sort of,
Brief.
yeah, like, well, go for it. I mean,
Newham,
take as long.
Newham, Newham for 3 months. Valentine more or less kicked me out the door because he couldn't stand the fact that I wasn't showing up. Thank you, Valentine. Thank you. Then Saxons for 3 years. Then Cat and the Dandy for a month. Then Huntsman for a year. Got pushed out of that as well. Oops.
Oh yeah.
And you know this. Don't act surprised for the camera, you idiot.
Really?
And DNL for 3 years.
Okay. So my first question would be, you've experienced multiple companies, you've experienced multiple environments of education. How do you compare them? How do you rate them? And what did you learn at what stage? And did you think that was what you were actually looking for? Because I remember you had already a picture in your mind of, I need to learn this. Whereas for me, it wasn't really like that. For me, it was more like, I'm just going to find the best place possible and I'll see what happens. But I remember you were very particular. You were like, I have to learn this and then make this and then go from there and go from there. So how did you find those different places work out, and what did you specifically learn at each stage?
I think initially, like I had a plan set out, but that quickly dissipated. I think as soon as I don't know, as soon as I got into Sextons, I realized there might be other avenues than the ones that I had set out for myself. I think the same was for you, right? Like you come in, and as you were saying, like it's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to do Newham for 3 years, and then I'm going to knock on a door. Whereas actually, you
Yeah.
realize that you could get in a lot faster than you initially anticipated, and then before long, you were already making coats. I think your question was very layered. I think the other things you mentioned were like what each place brought to me. Was that what you said?
Yeah, exactly. And did you was it the things that you expected it to be?
No,
Okay.
I didn't realize quite how much business savviness would have been involved in the tailoring trade. I think I learned everything from Edward and from Andy, who used to pop into Edwards a couple of times a week.
Andy being Andrew
Livingston,
Livingston. Yeah.
yeah, and know-it-all to them, really. And I say half of the stuff that I thought was most important actually wasn't. And I didn't realize that absorbing sort of the business end of things was actually what was going to ensure that I was able to sort of make my way through the trade quite like I have. Not that I've made a particular sort of impact at all, but at least sort of survived within it, is what I mean.
Can you give an example of the things you thought were important, but then eventually you thought, no, maybe not?
I thought it was all focused on the garment, but it wasn't. You can make the most beautiful garment and be the worst off tailor. Yeah, I didn't realize quite how much there was about you're performing and knowing how to engage with clients and just a general gist of running a business. Really, that was the big important thing that I learned from Edward.
Do you think there is some sort of a conflict between the personality that wants to run things and the personality that wants to make things?
It's that eternal problem that we will never solve, and that us do, at least in all our conversations, go on about time and time again. You know, the balance between how well you want to be eating and how well you want your garments to look, especially as an independent sort of tailor. And I'm sure you're having it. I've had it, and no, I'm no longer having it. I'm sure we'll elaborate on that. But yeah, like there is a sacrifice to the garment always, because if there wasn't, then the garment would never get made. And where you draw that line is dependent on how comfortably you want to live. And also, to an extent, the type of client that you attract, although maybe the client that you attract is dependent on the garment that you're putting out. So, but yeah, tough line to draw, always difficult one to work out, and it's different for everyone.
Would you know, one of the things that I completely agree with what you say is that there is an eternal clash, and you have to make up your mind within the framework of, okay, how much do I want to sacrifice financially and how much do I want to sacrifice artistically? And what it brings me into the idea of how does a client, for example, decide based on that, knowing that, what tailors to go for, and how can they navigate knowing that the tailor will always have some sort of a compromise somewhere, and then have that balanced out with their financial status and just the branding status of a company? Because it's not really an encouraging thing, but it is a reality. But it's not really a fancy thing to hear when you say, as someone who is a tailor, who knows all the tailors in London almost, and maybe other places in the world, you're saying something very real. There is always going to be some sort of a sacrifice, right? That is true. That is true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas when you look at branding things, it's like, we never compromise. We never do this. We always use the best quality of the right. And part of that is hocus pocus, and in the mind of the tailor, that they think they are using the highest quality and they're not compromising. But reality is, if there is no compromise on the craft level, there is also not going to be a workshop and a tailor who can actually produce that, right? How does a client deal with that, you think? How do they navigate through that?
Trial and error, which is the worst form of navigating through it. When you hear stories of, I went here and I didn't go back, it's always heartbreaking. Both for the tailor who's tried their best to achieve that balance and it hasn't worked out for them and they haven't managed to keep the client. And let's be frank here, this isn't a case of, is someone good enough or not to make a garment? It's a balance that has been chosen and hasn't worked out for someone in particular. But also it's I think there's a lot of miseducation with regards to clients coming in for the first time and not realizing quite how much the garments aren't what they imagined them to be. You know, the idea that because I've gone from buying a £1,000 suit to buying £5,000 suit that I should expect it to be 5 times better. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And
why not? And why not? Because it's a very fine detail that you're pointing out there. Why is paying 5 times?
Not going to make it back. For the reasons of sort of balance that we were talking about, and also an increase in the quality of ready-to-wear garmenting, and this, as you were pointing out also previously, this whole idea of marketing bespoke as this wonderfully perfected art, which it isn't. It's like you're getting it wrong all the time. So to sell it as the be-all and end-all, I think is raising the bar to the point where you, as a tailor, can't meet the expectations that the clients have developed.
And do you think that this has also some sort of a negative impact on the people who are learning within a company? Like, for example, you say that it's almost impossible to get things perfect all the time. And we definitely both have experienced that. And also another thing is also the image I had before I entered the tailoring shop to learn about a tailoring shop was very different than when I actually entered. And I'm talking about quality-wise, right?
Oh, so you imagined things to be a lot better?
Well, yeah, 2 things I imagined mainly. The first thing was that I thought before I moved to London at all, because I didn't have any tailoring background, right? So I didn't know anything about it, and I thought.
Well, you had your wonderful commission from your Iranian.
Oh yeah, I had that fantastic commission, which actually brought me into this world. But
can you go and get the jacket and wear it for the camera?
I not now, but I will. When I tell my story in that episode, I will put it there.
I look forward to that. Okay.
I thought the tailor would cut and do everything as a one man unit, right? And then I learned that you have cutters and you have tailors, you have finishers, you have pocket makers, blah 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 blah. So that was one thing that I thought, oh, that's weird, because it doesn't make sense to me how you can split up a craft in 2 and then long term expect the craft as one to develop, right? It's as if you say, look, I'm going to be a painter, but you do the pencil drawings and I do the colorations. And that could work absolutely perfect, right? If you have your specialization, I have mine, we can split up the work. But then I don't know how we are contributing to painting as one. You know what I mean? It's not obvious. I mean, we are probably, but the other thing was, sorry, I just to finish this and then you can tell me what you think. The other thing was that I thought everything was going to be technically perfect and every tailor there had a perfect answer for everything that they were doing and that they knew exactly what they were doing. Whereas slowly I thought, okay, this person didn't know this, but if they don't know this, then what else do they not know? Or sometimes you see, oh, they actually know this, but then another person says that that's wrong. And then you get this network of conflicting perspectives and ideas and also technical approaches. But you tell me what you think of all of that experience that you had.
So on sectioning the work side, I hadn't even thought about it before I realized that there were coat makers and waistcoat makers and finishers and cutters, and that the cutter's name was above the door, and you had even people in there that were just there for selling. Like it hadn't dawned on me to even consider that. But what's your view on sectioning now?
Interesting question. I think it has some merits. I think it depends on what the function is of the sectioning. If it's productivity only, it can be very good to have things in sections. But I
You
think
don't
if
think that it
it's
has merit in terms of raising the quality of the garment?
oh yes,
Oh,
definitely it
okay.
can. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. The things that I think it has a lot of merits. Like you say, it allows people to specialize in one thing. It speeds them up. It allows them to innovate around the same thing and perfect it technically, but also aesthetically. It reduces a lot of production time, which is only to the benefit of the company and perhaps the
And to the
customer.
client.
Yeah, exactly. If they are able to reduce their prices. And I think it really allows mastery to happen a lot quicker, only if there is some sort of a level of rotation. Because, yeah, you can make pockets for 5 years straight up, one after the other, and you can be perfectly happy with that and actually make a very good living. I remember Valentine was like, yeah, some pocket makers have a house or two. Maybe you should consider that, right? And at the same time, I think, well, at some point, you have to be really routinized in your mind and passionate, maybe even about making just one thing to be able to sustain that. And I think personally, I prefer an environment where you can choose to do sectional work, but there has to be some sort of a element of change. Maybe 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, you do one thing, but then you move on to the other, so that you become a capable artisan that can do many things at a very high level. Because, and the reason for that, you would say why? Because would be, personally, I'd like to see more tailors who have mastered multiple levels. I get very disappointed when I see or when I engage in a conversation with tailors where they have a level of specialty and they're really good at something, but at the same time, they haven't completely mastered their craft as a whole, just because they are lacking certain perspectives and experiences on certain levels. What do you think of that? Do you think that that's
I don't. Yeah, I didn't really consider it in that way before. In that I didn't see, if you look at it like true sectional system, in my opinion, I mean, if I were to buy a garment and there were still tailors around that had true sectional systems in place, I would buy from them. If I
can
wanted
you
the best
tell can you
garment I
tell
could
also
get,
why?
if I wanted the best garment that I could get, I, I I wouldn't buy from them for another reason, but because the garment would be, in theory, the most well put together. You've got people, as you're imagining, specializing in particular fields and who have honed in on that particular field, and therefore you're benefiting from the highest end of the craft, in theory. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
No, yeah.
But oh yeah, no, sorry. But my opinion is that it's disappeared, not because there's a need for people to sort of come away from that in order to build better garments. Quite the opposite, but because we've completely lost our sense of collectivism, generally speaking. And there's this like, I mean, I'm part of that response. There's this like growing individualism coming through the trade currently, and you're seeing it sparking up left, right, and center. With brand X, brand Y, brand Z,
Yeah.
independent, exacerbated by COVID. This exodus of like young, burgeoning talents that want to make their full garments. So I see our progression from, what Huntsman was doing in the 50s to some of the exodus that we've been seeing currently, as being a manifestation of that. And coming back to my initial point, that's why if I were wanting to support the trade, I wouldn't buy from an establishment that ran along sectional lines, on the basis that I would rather buy a garment that was built from top to bottom by a single person, in that infusing that garment would be this invisible, non-apparent, but I would know it, a sense of satisfaction from having supported an individual in maintaining the craft and sustaining his living or her living or their living.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's
you're
why.
bringing two very good directions, and I think both of them are equally valid. So you say that it depends on what perspective you're adopting. If you are thinking of buying something, do you want the premium quality thing that has been perfected by sectional work, almost like a factory, right? You don't go to a car manufacturer to buy a car that's made by one single engineer. You just go for something that has been perfected, and everyone is specialized in the thing that they do, and hopefully they can bring it together. And then the other perspective is, if I would want to support the artisan and the community of the artisans, I would go to the individual artisan, right? What do you think
On a side note, for different reasons, it can now be argued that the individual artisan is actually making a better garment nowadays. Without wanting to without wanting to go any further on the point, but just to mention that, I think that's an arguable fact. For reasons primarily relating to that balance that we were speaking about, and there being a possibility for individuals to sway it more towards the quality of the garment because of how they're set up. But yeah, let's leave that there.
No, that's it. Well, do you think, my question would be, do you think that clients nowadays, do they really want the best suit? Like, as in, technically, specification-wise, do they want the best suit, or do they really want something beyond the suit? Do they want to enter the creative room or the creative?
It's that blend, isn't it? It's that blend. Yeah, that and if the garment's shit, they're not going to return. That's clear. You need to be producing something reasonably acceptable. And as I pointed out, as an individual, sometimes it's easier to do that. But yeah, I don't know if we were speaking about it, and I'm sure you're going to encounter more and more of it. But there's a lot of just building relationships and like having charms, and it no longer becomes about the garment, but becomes about having friends who you happen to be making for, who you enjoy making for, and who enjoy being in your company, and great benefit to them. They get to wear your clothes at a cost. Obviously, they need to support you. But it's it becomes a lovely sort of nurtured relationship, a friendship. It really is. Or at least it has been in cases that I've encountered over the past 3 years.
Would you say that? And I know this may seem like obvious, but it's not always obvious, and I'd like to know your opinion. Would you say that when the relation between the tailor and the client strengthens and they meet each other more frequently, that the quality of the garment made improves as well?
Yeah, drastically.
Tell me more, and I'm curious what you're going to say. What I would say to that was yes, in the sense that the tailor would be able to help the client to make decisions maybe better, or suggest things that are more in line with their philosophy and their way of living and their world. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, if the tailor doesn't have the ability and the tools and the vision to improve technically, then your client can place 70 orders and you can talk to them every day 24/7, but it wouldn't necessarily improve. So how would you look at this thing?
Look at it, to draw a weird analogy, when you're cooking for your mum, you're always trying to do a lot better than when you're cooking for a friend. The same applies to sort of making garments. If the person that you're making for has a more important place in your everyday, then there's a lot more willingness to go further, and that balance sways more towards the garment. if the person in front of you is basically anonymous, there's little incentive to do more than the balance that you had initially set out in your mind. That's why.
Now I have a question. First of all, I completely agree with you. It's always good to have someone who you want to prove yourself for, and you want to kind of like outperform and show them that the appreciation you have for them, that they have chosen you. That's very important. And I think, that's the big challenge. Like, will I be letting this person down? Yes or no? Will they return? Will it create a bad reputation for me, a good reputation?
Not even your own reputation. It's just, anyway, in my sense, a lot of
But something you know as well as I do, not every tailor thinks like that. And there are sometimes clients, and no, I don't want to be bitchy about it. I just want to explore an idea. Some tailors have returning clients who they take them for granted. They say, oh, this person, they order like 70 things per year. They wouldn't notice that this is slightly off or that is slightly off. So in that scenario, I feel like maybe they stop actually wanting to prove themselves because they are like, this person is now a client forever or whatsoever. What do you think about that? Do you think that's because that's just something like an attitude the tailor has, or is that something that we could all be prone to as tailors?
It comes back to that initial discussion we were having about balance and where that lies. And if they're ordering, as you say, 70 garments a year, well, they're there because they're able to order 70 garments a year, and it's unlikely that they would be able to do it somewhere else. So I'm sure if in this instance, or you could draw up any other, but there's a reason why someone sticks, and that's because they're happy with the balance, and there are benefits from the drawbacks that the garment incurs, and those could be price benefits, or those could be time benefits. And those are just as important to consider as any others. Coming back to that, you take ages to make a garment for good reason. And the people who come to buy from you know that it's going to take them ages. And if they start pushing you for time, you're going to go, no, right? Well, if it just so happens that the person who was ordering from you at that point said, well, hang on, Reza, I want to order a couple more this year, and you're not going to be able to fulfill those orders, so maybe I should start looking elsewhere, then you'd be perfectly accepting of that that comment and say, yeah, sure, let me recommend you someone, right? So the notion that it needs to rely solely on the notion that the value of a tailoring house relies solely on the garments that they're putting out, I think is slightly erroneous. That people shop for more reasons than just the quality of a coat. That being said, we wouldn't, but some would.
Yeah.
We'd rather sacrifice time and money at whatever expense to get the best that we can. Some would rather get more than one garment, and which is perfectly acceptable reason for not shopping with someone like you.
Well, I guess that comes back to the conundrum of the clash of the businessman and the artisan personalities and how you balance it out, just like you say. Tailoring companies and growth. That's something I'd like to see what you think of that. I was talking to someone and they were saying that, I went to 4 different places and I couldn't grow my skills in any of those places because there simply weren't enough positions. And so if I would go to one company, the highest, it's very similar to what you once told me, the highest position I could ever acquire would be replacing the head cutter or maybe just working alongside them in the best possible scenario. Or if I would really become a master tailor, the highest position I would be able to attain would be head coat maker or head trouser maker or whatsoever. What's your take on that? How do you see the opportunity spectrum in tailoring companies? Do you think there are problems there? Do you think there things can be improved? And I know you have experienced both education in the what do you call it, the college side of learning tailoring there, and then also on the tailoring work floor in professional shops. What do you think? What's your take on that?
It's interesting how you've approached the question, which is from a businessman's perspective or business owner's perspective.
Yes.
And again, it just so happens that you're striving for that individualism. But there are many who wouldn't. And there's just as much worth in being a coat maker without having to seek growth within the hierarchy of a tailoring house as there is in being at the top of the food chain within it. If you wanted it, like, I don't see it being difficult in getting it. Like, wait enough time and you'll climb the ladder. Show enough incentive. But
I must also say that when I say growth, I don't necessarily mean. I mean, that's what this person said, but if I would expand it a little bit, I wouldn't necessarily mean that everyone who comes in can also immediately become like the CEO of a company or whatsoever. But I meant it more in the sense that when the positions are very limited, the tasks that you're going to perform are going to be limited. And if you are performing limited tasks, then there is only so much you can make money-wise from, like, as a tailor. And I know that a lot of tailors, they do say that, look, if there was one thing that I would change, I would like to get paid a bit more, which is it's a legit thing, because you've chosen to be a coat maker for the rest of your life.
Like tailors, like established tailors or apprentice tailors, asking to be paid more.
No, established tailors, I would say.
Established tailors asking to be paid more.
Yes,
really?
yes. Because it depends on also what. Every tailoring house makes different things, and they take a different time frame to make. But when you are working on something and you see it as a job, I think at some point everyone wants to do better, right? Yes, you want to have sustainable income and you just want to have the safety. But then if you are not able to develop your craft at the same time so that you become more relevant to the company you're working for, you can be replaced very easily. Like, maybe you have been working for 10 years with a company and you know their style and you know the people. But at some point, if a business person decides that, look, you're not making as much as you were 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or you're not really adding any more value to the company, but this person is, then the chance of you being replaced could be higher. I'm not saying that would happen, but it could be. And so for me, growth is more like, how can you expand your craft in a way that what you're doing today is so much better than 10 years ago,
Right.
In that sense, I mean.
Right. Coming back to my comment about tailors being paid more and putting a face.
Putting a face.
I'm sure there are some that aren't paid enough. So apologies to those that find themselves in that situation. But as a general rule, I think it can be said that if you're a coat maker or trouser maker and that you've been established for a while, things are pretty comfortable. So reason for my grimace, and apologies to those who might have taken offense to that. So the growth in which you're speaking about, it comes from like a wish to sort of strive for more personally, and therefore relying on a company to sort of bring you that. I don't see how that sort of. Are you saying that? Sorry, I don't really understand. Are you saying that the companies that tailors are working for aren't sort of giving them enough incentive to be better, or what is it
Oh
you're
yes,
alluding to?
that's
Right.
definitely
Okay.
that's definitely a part. But let me speak from my own experience,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
I
Okay.
want to that because it's so. I moved to London wanting to learn tailoring. The initial thing, and I didn't know whether I was going to be good at it or whatsoever. I just thought this is going to be my thing. Let's see how it goes, right? So I moved to London. I do Newham. I noticed that I have some talent. I seem to be learning things quicker than majority of people around me, right? Okay, so maybe it was a good choice. Then I go to Savile Row, wanting to learn the way it is supposed to be done. Obviously, that's a naive thought because first day you walk in, you know there are hundreds of ways of doing things, and all of them are in disagreement with one another, and sometimes some of them don't even work. They're just things that people made up just to suit themselves because they couldn't improve beyond that, right? Then I think, all right, what do I need to learn? I have to learn X, Y, Z. Okay, let me try to learn X, Y, Z. So I learn X, Y, Z. Then I notice, hey, I've got some creative ideas. I'd like to do a little bit more. Maybe I want to spend 10 minutes more on doing this just to get it perfect. Maybe I want to think about innovating around a technique. Remember when we were at Newham and you said, how can you make sure that cross pockets don't gape? So maybe you have to do, and then you came up with this mechanism of if you put this there and you do that, then maybe if after use it, you came up with a hypothesis, right? And so that's the willingness to, that's the desire to innovate, right? But then if a company is limited in what they are doing and they have a set system, let's say, and they want to just produce that because it buys them time, money, and all of that, you as the innovator are very limited what you can do. There is no position in that company that allows you to do more than you have learned. They say, look, learn this and do this. And if you don't like it, fine, leave or go to somewhere where they do want to do it, right? So those are roughly your options. And what I would think then is, why wouldn't there be positions like, or not even positions, but activities like, okay, let's improve this part of our system. Let's improve that part of the company. Let's have, because ready-to-wear does that. When you have a ready-to-wear company, they bring people who are technicians. Those technicians are able to communicate with each other. They say, look, purely the business model that we have demands from us that we should find a way.
Okay, so I see where you're heading. I think it's what you're alluding to is that the overarching figure that's sort of dictating how things are done is unwilling to come away from what has been done for ages, right? And that what has been done for centuries doesn't need to be improved upon. Is that just a symptom of tradition? Is that just, old guys generally not wanting things to change and also thinking that the way they were taught is the best way, and someone coming along and saying then makes them feel a little bit bad about the fact that they've been doing it for so many years and it might not have been great. There's also, I don't know. I know when I was coming in, that I had a stinking attitude with regards to wanting to change stuff, and I think that's quite dissuasive as well. In that you're stepping on toes and you're bruising, not bruising egos, but you're put it more kindly. I mean, people who have pride in the ways in which they've been making things for decades don't necessarily want to be told that what they're doing isn't the best way of doing it, do they? Yeah, but that's what you're here for, right? You're doing a lot of research into bettering techniques, and you're sharing it, more importantly, which is really great.
Well, I try.
I can only imagine how great it would have been for us to to have had the resources that you put online at the time when we were at Newham. That would have been fucking fantastic.
Well, I think then Newham would be. I mean, I'm not that far into the project, but I think if we did have a complete set of contents that would show you everything me and you have been learning in the past 5-6 years, then majority of those hassles and those weird moments would not be relevant anymore. You know, they would. It would open up time and energy for other things, maybe, and perhaps speed up the learning curve. Look, this is something I wanted to say in regards to just 2 minutes ago. What I've noticed is when you talk to tailors, one of the most frequently things they say is, it's good to be open-minded because everyone has a trick or two to teach you. And so why not know 3 ways of doing something, or why not learn this and why not learn that? And I completely agree with that. Here is the funny part. And this is where I think things could be better from a company perspective, like just for companies in general. If so many artisans like to learn more techniques, and the reason why they want to learn more techniques is perhaps improve their work or speed their efficiency or improve that, why is it so that so few tailoring companies systematize the research into new techniques and efficiencies so that the artisans have more dialogue amongst themselves in a way that when you teach me something and I learn something from you, if that's better, I can just, as a company, adopt that and say, okay, this is the best version of what we have done so far, for example, on this part. And then if anyone can improve on that, then we just adopt that. And then we continue the cycle. So, and you incentivize that. Why do you think that doesn't happen that often? Because, you have all individual artisans. They all have their things, even within the same company, right? Each artisan just slightly does it differently. And then if one of them improves on something, it's not necessarily so that everyone takes that on board, It's not formalized. It's just like, oh, I found a clever way of doing pockets so that they don't fray, for example. And then that person finds out about it, and then the company doesn't take that on board and spread it across all the artisans. And so innovation really becomes a very slow process, It becomes like so slow that 20 people reinvent the same wheel, and then 10 years after that, someone says, look, there is a solution to that problem. You know what I mean? Or am I being silly?
Well, okay. I think our biggest problem is there's no governing body or no governing institution of education within tailoring. We lost the Tailoring Cutter Academy. And as soon as we said bye-bye to that was it. You leave yourself open to mysticism and to unscientific conclusion. I did something once, it worked, I'm going to do it forever. Like that kind of thing that we've always sort of tried to steer away from. That's the main reason. And it's now been reduced to being done by the houses themselves who like, no, it should be done by an independent sort of body of people who are well versed in the art of making garments. What can you do? You can't do anything about it. That's the way things are, and also with coat makers now working less and less in house, and there being less of this sort of collective spirit. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there being less of a collective spirit within houses, it means that you can't enforce anything. Had Joe said to you, for instance, Reza, I think making our jets like this would be better from now on, and you disagreed with him, how would he have, implemented that technique on you? without you then actually doing it your own way. You couldn't have. There's no one behind you watching, QCing your work if you disagree with it. So again, no QC, no sectional system.
Do you think it's good if companies have sectional systems more often? Do you see that as a good thing?
I mean, good and bad, right? It's bad for probably the employee. Bit of a Charlie Chaplin moment, like you can't stop doing the same thing. You know? And also makes it more interesting for the market to have individuals making. And the only way for our market to survive nowadays is for that to be the case. So yeah, I see things progressing as they should.
What are you doing now, Josh?
I have left the trade. Well, I haven't quite left it. I've sort of left it. I'm still keeping a foot in it, but I'm now teaching at Wimbledon College of Arts. So I'm a lecturer for UAL on the costume, the screen, and theatre course. Yeah, it had been a vocation of mine for quite a number of years before starting DNL. And I got an opportunity to start a business with Kimberly, so I jumped at the opportunity, and that has been really lovely. But yeah, times have changed, and for reasons which I won't elaborate on too much, I've decided to sort of sway away from being too tied to the tailoring trade. Yeah.
What would you say was the most, or some of the most valuable things that you learned in the last 2 to 3 years, from a business perspective and from a crafts perspective?
From a business perspective, in the last 2 or 3, I learned it from Edward. I'm just replicating what Edward taught me, really. I don't know. I'm sure there are things off the top of my head I can't. I'm sure there are 1,000 things that I should mention, but off the top of my head I can't think of any.
Would you say that
personally, personally, I've learned that this isn't for me.
What do you mean this isn't? Do you mean setting up your own company, or
yeah? Just it's.
Can you say why? Can you say why? If you would describe, like, what were the things that brought you to that conclusion? What are some elements that people can watch out for?
I don't like making clothes anymore.
You don't like making clothes anymore?
Not in the way in which I have been making them.
Right. And what way would you say you were making them?
As in making them day in, day out, and making the same pieces day in, day out. And in not so much because I'm disinterested in the clothing in particular that I'm making, but more so that I'm making it without more purpose than to make clothes, and I find that quite stifling, and quite vain, and it's always something that I battled with when going into the garmenting trade, is that it exists only in and of itself. There's nothing more that stems from it than making clothes. Okay, like the maintaining of a craft and a set of skills, and the furthering of like garmenting technique. These are all like noble things, and also job opportunities. Great, and craftsmanship in general is a great thing that we need to uphold. But we're not building a house for someone to live in. We're making clothes for people who can afford to pay the high prices for the clothes that we're making. And I just feel like there's a lack in something else that sort of turned me away from it. I'm still keeping a foot in it, but I'm going to be making tailoring differently from now on and for different purposes. So I'm going to start a new business. It's not business; it's a social enterprise, and it's going to, because I've got a tailoring client book of friends that I really enjoy seeing and making clothes for. But I don't want to just simply be making clothes without there being any more to it. So it's basically a non-profit, and all the proceeds that come from making garments for them will go towards making garments free of charge for disadvantaged LGBTQ youth. So it's something that incorporates garmenting, that incorporates all the skill sets that I enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis, but also that has some kind of like community impact. Then that means that now I can sort of start to feel a little bit more involved and a little bit more feel a bit more vocation for the clothes that I'm making, and also a bit more interest for the benefits that are going to be had from the garments that are being created.
It's almost as if you're describing that. What you're describing is there is a danger that the routine of your work becomes purposeless or meaningless if the work takes over the entire reason for what you're doing. It just becomes getting the work done, and it's not really related to something that you would aspire to kind of like move towards, roughly. That's what I'm sensing. Well, I know. Well, I tell you what.
Yeah. It's
when
just
you talk,
like a sense of greater good. Like I've been lacking. I've been really missing feeling like something good comes from what I do. You know.
Yes.
And I'm now getting that in teaching. Like I've got all these kids running around like crazy, being like, "How the fuck do I make this?" I'm like, "Do that, do that, do that." You know, and it's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And also, it's nice being around people of that age who have just come out of school and are entering university, or who have been in university for a couple of years and are still like have this wonderful naivety and this like sense of like wanting to absorb. It's lovely, and I'm enjoying delivering classes to them and watching them sort of like adopt techniques, and I know that you know what I'm teaching them is going to allow them to get jobs in the future. So there's this sense of like value in that, which is really, you know, giving me shivers down my spine every time I leave work, and I'm like, wow, that was a good day. And I actually rang Valentine. For those of you who don't know, Valentine is the big man tutor, or was. He's just left.
I should interview him.
You should, at Newham College, who's the most amazing tutor that one could hope for. I mean, how great was he? Like, amazing. Like the feedback that he would give would just give you this great sense of achievement, and you'd be like, I'm good at something, you know, I can do this, and I'm gonna be able to do it, and it's just everything.
Well, I wanted to tell you, when we were walking in Knightsbridge one day, and I don't know whether we had a discussion or we were just exploring ideas. I don't know. But you stopped me in the middle of the street, and you said, Reza, listen, the highest achievement you can have in tailoring.
Shit, you've gone off. Oh, one sec. Oh, sorry, you were on the cusp of something important and my connection broke out. You were like, listen, go.
You said, Reza, the highest position you can attain in tailoring is to have your name on a shop sign.
Yeah, bullshit.
No, listen, it wasn't
that and I didn't fucking want it.
Well, let me tell you this. Look, it's not bullshit as in, I think you said it as an observation more than, oh, this is what you have to aspire to. And I thought, well, that observation is dead accurate. And I found that the most depressing moment of that year, because it was, and it still is true for many tailors and for many apprentices when they are going into a company. It's within people to want to grow and to look at themselves and look 20 years back and say, man, I've come a long way. You know, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that. And so what I felt within tailoring was that, look, either the business owner has to trust me so much so that they say, I am willing to employ you as an apprentice and then as an employee, and then perhaps provide you a cutting position, and then maybe if I want to retire or if I die, you can take over, right? And I thought, well, it just seems a bit weird for me because, first of all, there is only so much growth. Like, yes, it takes a lifetime to perfect something, but I'm not going to stay 50 years in one place just to learn the basics of, for example, cutting, or the basics of running a business. You look at some people in history and they set up something and they did it when they were like 20 years old and they perfected it by the time they were like 30, and then maybe on their 40th birthday they died. And you think, like, how long does my career have to be for me to reach a level that I could actually have some impact? Like, you hit the nail on the head by saying that there is a limit to this industry. You know, there is a lack of bigger purpose for the majority of tailors beyond, let's say, family. Yes, that's a purpose. You know, career, that could be a purpose. But what you're saying now is a lot more important, and I wonder, why is it so that within our tailoring community, let's say within our tailoring industry, the level of purpose and the level of contribution to society is perceived as very small. Many tailors say, you're just making clothes. Many tailors say, you know, eventually the client is just going to wear this once and then that's it, that's your labor. Whereas I think, well, if we could contribute more to society and more to our community, what would that be? And I think that one of the things of that is what you're doing as well.
Yes, I would agree. The contribution is small because you're only making clothes. I think you could argue that it's slightly greater than if you were sort of simply cutting or making within the ready-to-wear industry, in that you're preserving a craft and you're making sustainable clothing as well. But ultimately you're making very expensive clothing. So you're only making clothing for the 1%. And on top of that, all you're doing is draping a bit of cloth over a person, which isn't, to say, a particularly life-changing object to bring to someone's being. So, you know, either you feel satisfied in doing that day in, day out, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it's common for people not to feel that way, and for them to seek other forms of what's the word? You're gonna have to help me out here.
Other forms of expression?
No.
Other forms of contribution to society, to their community?
You're gonna have, yeah. Well, oh my God, I'm looking for one word in particular.
Greater
gratification.
Right.
Yes. I think it's common for people to seek other forms of gratification. And you're doing it by making the content of your brain available to everyone on the internet, and by striving to sort of further the craft. by also supporting your own living. I suppose that, as you mentioned, in and of itself is something worthwhile doing, probably.
Yeah. Good idea.
Especially in London.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm done, not for me. Like running a profit-driven enterprise. Nah. No,
Okay.
thanks.
All right, let's do a speed round, my friend.
Speed round.
Yes, I've got a few words. I'd like to know what the first thing is that pops up your mind when you hear them.
Okay.
Yeah, ready?
Can I say dirty words?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want, man.
Okay.
There's no censorship here. Apprenticeships.
Suffering. Or can I reframe? Dante's Inferno. A direct representation.
Suffering. Very good. How would you define quality?
Speed round. This is where I falter. How would you define quality? Vague question. Can't answer it in a speed round. Pass.
All right, pass. Setting up a business.
Mistake.
Mistake. Tailoring education.
Troubled by these times.
Troubled by these times.
Both in COVID, I think we've got a big issue at the minute. Sorry, just to go further on that. I've received so many emails from a variety of like students coming out of UM or LCF or other courses who cannot find apprenticeships, and it's not the usual emails where it's like, can I do some work? It's like, I've looked everywhere, I can't find work. There's a problem at the minute. Yeah, I feel sorry for anyone coming out of a course right now who's trying to get into the trade. It's a shit time. So persist, keep going. If you're watching this, you've got it. It will happen.
Fingers crossed. Ready to wear.
Oh God. I can't say one word about this.
Well, you can say two if you want, but the first thing, really.
If you haven't yet got an opportunity to have clothes made for you, and those clothes don't have to be too expensive. I think there are options out there where you can have clothes made by people who will make them at a very reasonable cost. Then you should definitely continue buying ready to wear. But if ever you come to a point in your life where you don't need so many garments and you can have them made for you, you absolutely should. And there's no excuse for you not having them made for you. And that doesn't have to come at a considerable cost. There are plenty of sewing communities around London and elsewhere in the world, I'm sure, where you could pay a very reasonable price for something made out of very good material and keep it for a very long time. Look at your smiling face.
I can't read my own heart. Oh yeah, I've got it. Routine.
Routine. Oh, I fail at routine. Yeah, you do really well.
What routine?
Waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, pinging off a load of emails.
Yeah, I'm pretty good with routines. I think I've almost mastered the art of setting up routines and kind of like shuffling around with them. But okay. Purpose.
Oh, there is no such thing.
There is no.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm reading The Selfish Gene at the minute by Richard Dawkins, and I've adopted. It hasn't drastically changed my view on the world, and that I already had this view, but it's only reinforced it. There is no such thing
As purpose.
There is no such thing as purpose.
Well, I wonder what his purpose is with writing that book if there is no purpose.
You could, I mean, yes, I suppose you could see it in that way. But in the end, we're all going to be worm meat.
We will die in the 9th circle. Hold on, I've got one. I've got two more. I've got two more. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Savile Row. Careful.
Oh man. Unfortunately, on the cusp of death, I would say. And I would rather see it go than see it turn ugly. I still believe there'll be a place for the big houses. But all this sad sort of affiliation to the name in the street, which is illegitimate, I think is a bit upsetting for those for whom that name meant so much. Not upsetting for me, but I can imagine sort of older people within the trade looking at that and feeling quite angered.
Right.
Tough one. You could argue there's a place for what I'm mentioning as well. And there's, be ashamed to destroy a lineage of sorts, but I don't know. I haven't got a settled opinion on it yet.
Well, I think you're saying something that's genuine. There is
I'm not saying anything new though.
No, it doesn't need to be new.
Like,
it's
the same old debate's been around for ages, hasn't it? I remember even Edward telling me when he was getting into the trade back in the 60s, it's a dying trade, him being told by some old cutter at Kilgour or something. So
yeah.
What can you do?
Well,
what you can do is do what you're doing and like set up your own company and keep the skill set alive.
Well, we hope so. I've got one more left.
Oh.
And that is Joshua.
Is that all we've had time for?
Joshua Dobrik.
Oh, my own name.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
You can.
I don't fucking know.
You can use a sentence for this one. Joshua, it doesn't need to be a word. You can use a sentence. A word is too restricting for that. So is a sentence, but at least a sentence gives you a bit more.
Oh God.
Maybe not eternal Joshua Dobrik, but Joshua Dobrik at the moment.
Joshua Dobrik at the moment, enjoying life again.
Okay, that's a very good sentence to hear. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, Josh, thank you for this conversation. I wish we could talk for hours and hours.
June.
I'm sure we do this more often, but it's been good.
Thank you, June. Much love to you.
And that was Josh. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. In fact, I'd like you to join the conversation in the comment section so that you can share your thoughts and ideas and observations, or perhaps solutions to some of the problems, so that we have a conversation going with you as well. If you like to see more of Josh, you can follow the link to his Instagram in the description of this video. And if there are people that you'd like me to interview or topics that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. You can DM me on Instagram or just drop your thoughts in the comments. So until then, until the next episode, bye-bye.